Number 1. Garden Party. You've probably heard stories about people who live in a small town, and how bored they often are, especially as teenagers. Well, at the risk of sounding like an old man, when I was their age, I didn't even live in a town. I lived in a trailer in the hills. Our nearest neighbor was a half-mile down the road, and let me tell you what real boredom is. There was no cruising around town, no hanging out at the Tasty Freeze, none of that. When I got my first car, or rather a hand-me-down pickup truck, our great thrill was driving it around on the winding roads up in the hills, counting possums we saw on the side of the road. Compared to us, small-town kids had it good. There was only one time I can think of where something interesting happened. And let me tell you, it's not something you ever want to see. My best friend Lucas had a little brother named Brody. Don't ask. Country people get a bit eccentric with names, okay? It's way less of that Ricky Bobby shit people think it is, and a lot more old obscure Bible names and random syllables thrown together to make something unique. Anyway, when Brody turned 13, Lucas decided it was time to teach the little bastard to drive. Of course, Lucas didn't have a car. None of our friends did except me. So that evening, we piled 4 or 5 of us in the back of that ratty old pickup with me, Lucas, and Brody up front. And we headed out into the night, drinking beer and trusting our lives on those twisty old roads to some terrified 13-year-old boy who'd never sat behind the wheel before. Sometimes I wonder how the hell we ever survived to adulthood. Not only were these roads old and twisty, but they were up in the hills. Usually, you'd be cruising along and on one side, you'd have the looming side of a hill, and on the other, a steep, tree-covered slope into nothingness. There were no streetlights. The roads themselves were so old and poorly maintained that sometimes they seemed little more than dirt roads. They also often branched off into dirt roads and paths into the various hollows between the hills, as well as driveways that you completely miss if it weren't for the little red reflector on the mailbox at the end. I'm telling you, it was some crazy shit, and I don't know why we were so stupid as to risk our lives driving around there all the time. It was just the only thing to do. Well, on that night, none of us were really paying attention to where we were going. Us older kids were drinking, having designated young Brody as our driver for the night, whether he wanted it or not. The boys in the back had taken to shooting the occasional mailbox with a BB gun. When we found ourselves at a dead end, I supposed it was time to teach Brody how to do a 3-point turn. Only on the narrow road, there wasn't a place to do it. I knew we'd pass the drive, a little way back, so lesson 1 was how to drive in reverse for half a mile by your taillights without shooting us off the side of the hill. The boys in the back were shouting and jeering at Brody for landing us on what had to be the only dead-end road in the hills, and the poor kid's face was beet red. And come to think of it, I'm not even sure Brody ever really agreed to any of this, but nothing I can do about it now. Slowly, he backed the truck down the road about half a mile when the driveway showed up on our right. It was a long drive that led up to a big house, abandoned from the look of it. It had to be worth something at some point, because the drive had a gate at the end to keep people out. Unfortunately, it was also keeping us from having room to turn. "Might need to back up and find another drive," Lucas said. I heard a loud crack and a pinging sound as someone in the back shot the gate with a BB gun. "No," Brody hissed through gritted teeth. "I'm not backing up anymore. Hey." I'm not backing up anymore. Either open the gate or one of you drive. His face was burning and his jaw was clenched. Apparently, driving around a bunch of drunken, rowdy teenage boys while they treated you like a chauffeur, all the while telling you how happy you should be for their teaching you to drive, wasn't as much fun for him as it was for us. Well, we couldn't have our driver giving up on us, so we decided to hop out and open the gate to give him some room. Now, when I say a gate, I don't mean one of those pretty wrought iron impale the priest like in the Omen gates. No, it was one of those metal arm barrier gates with a no trespassing sign stuck to it. Well, from the look of that house, no one was going to mind a little trespassing right now. The gate was locked with a padlock, but one good thing about a pickup truck is that along with a horde of drunken teenagers, they're also good at hauling tools. One of the boys handed me a bolt cutter, and I made quick work of the lock. The gate swung open, and I began directing Brody on how to turn around. He backed up to the point of being able to pull forward into the drive. The headlights illuminated the old house and the front yard. The boards of the house were old and rotting. There was junk all in the yard, and I figured my estimation of the house's value had been way off. I couldn't really see much of what was in the yard, just silhouettes and shadows created by the headlights. "Ha! Look at that!" shouted Boyd, the one currently holding the BB gun in the bed of the truck. "I bet I can hit that from here." I turned to see a figure in the yard, lit by the headlights, as Brody pulled forward into the drive. It was tall and skinny, its arms being held straight out to its side. It was some sort of scarecrow. I don't know if it was actually part of a garden that had long since grown over, or if it was just some kind of lawn decoration. But standing there in the dark, with the only headlights of the pickup to see it by, was a terrifying thing. Someone in the back of the truck found a flashlight and flicked it on, making the shadow of the scarecrow jump and loom on the front of the house. I turned back from the scarecrow to see Boyd aiming the BB gun. "Don't shoot it," I said uncomfortably as I waved Brody in a little further. "I know I can hit it from here," Boyd said as he aimed. I don't know why I cared. No one in this old abandoned house was gonna give a damn about us shooting up a scarecrow with a BB gun. It just made me nervous for some reason. "What? You think you'll be mad?" Boyd jeered. I glanced over my shoulder at the scarecrow, but said nothing. I signaled Brody to stop. "Now turn the wheel the other way and start backing out," I told him. Just then, there was a loud crack from the BB gun. It startled Brody, and he hit the gas too hard. He also turned the wheel too far, and the truck twisted and slammed into the pipe on which the gate was hinged. "Damn it, Boyd!" I shouted, running around to the side of the truck to see the damage. It was an old rusty piece of junk, but it was still my truck. My first truck, and I didn't want to see it banged up any worse than it already was. The angle and speed of the truck somehow got the pipe wedged up behind the tire. I was directing Brody and trying to correct this when another crack told me Boyd was still shooting the scarecrow. "Knock it off!" I shouted as Boyd pumped up for another shot. Another crack, and laughter from the peanut gallery was all the response I got. I glanced over my shoulder, again, at the scarecrow. The way the lights were angled now, the shadow it cast over the house was larger and even more grotesque. "Make yourself useful and help me unstick the truck," I said, indicating all the guys in the back. A few jumped out to help, but Boyd wasn't letting up on his scarecrow vendetta. Lucas had switched seats with Brody. I couldn't tell if the kid was happier now or not. He just sat in the cab with his arms crossed. glowering it down into his lap. I shouted instructions to the guys and Lucas as we worked the truck loose. All the while, Boyd shooting up the Scarecrow and various other items in the yard. He was whooping and cheering himself on. One of the others must have stayed in the truck with him because I was suddenly blinded by a flashlight beam. Swearing, I turned away from the truck and the lights, seeking the darkness of the yard, while I blinked my vision back in order. As my eyes cleared, I stumbled back and into the hood of the truck. The flashlight scanned over the yard, and for the first time, I could see what the shadows in the yard had been. It wasn't junk, and it wasn't lawn decorations. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. There were scarecrows, dozens of them, different sizes, and wearing different clothes. They were old and worn from being outside, but the clothes were still recognizable as outfits. Not just random stuff thrown together, but actual outfits. There were female scarecrows, male scarecrows, some in dresses, some in suits. The creepiest of all, however, were the children. Tiny scarecrows in sundresses, and some in overalls. They seemed to be depicting the scene of a party, though they all just stood with their arms stretched wide, and their faces drawn on burlap sacks. There was total silence as we all stared at this crazy scene. Crack! Boyd shot one of the child scarecrows right between the painted-on eyes. I snapped my head around to look at the drunken idiot standing in the back of the truck laughing. You should see your face. Did you shit your pants? I started yelling at Boyd. I don't even know what I said, but I wasn't the only one yelling. Everyone was pissed. The flashlight holder flipped off the light and smacked Boyd in the shoulder with it. Lucas hit the gas, and with the help of the other guys, we got the truck off the pipe. As the guys were piling back into the back of the truck, I turned to look at the scarecrows one last time. When I saw a light shining from the front door of the house, there was a silhouette there, a tall one, with its arms stretched out to its sides like a scarecrow. I just bolted for the cab. I barely got in and closed the door when Lucas, having seen what I saw, gunned it, spitting gravel as he backed out, turned, and got us the hell out of there. I don't know what the fuck was going on at that place. I don't even know where it was because we never found it again. Not that we tried. I mean, seriously, would you? Number 2. Meteor shower. This is a very, very old story. This happened before people had computers, cell phones, and not even everyone I knew had a television. My grandparents, who lived on a farm though, did have one. We went and visited them several times a year. They had a beautiful house, a barn, silos, and fields of corn. The only thing I didn't really like about the farm was how dark and creepy it got around nighttime. We didn't live in a city, like New York or anything, but there were plenty of streetlights in our neighborhood. But at my grandparents' farm, it got really, really dark. I remember my first time seeing the Milky Way because of the lack of light. It looked like a huge rift in the sky, and I got dizzy, feeling like I was gonna fall in. And when I began going in the summertime, as I got older, my cousin Carl and I began getting very interested in astronomy. I actually worked in the field for a very long time before retiring. It all came from that farm though. When I got into my early teen years, Carl and I would sometimes climb onto the roof of the house and sit and watch the sky. It was pretty cool, and it was the most freeing experience I had ever had in my life. So when I was 15 years old, I had this really eerie experience on the farm. My parents and I went to the house for a week. I was really happy because Carl was going to be there too. There was supposed to be a meteor shower, and the two of us planned on sitting on the roof and watching it. When I got there, my grandpa needed some help with the scarecrows. He had several of them in the cornfield. I sort of thought they were useless, really, but he believed in them. I hated the scarecrows. I guess I was a bit of a coward, but when I walked by one of them, I could have sworn that it moved. I looked at it and approached it slowly, but I wasn't brave enough to really do anything. I told myself that I was just imagining things happening because I was scared of scarecrows. Instead of reaching out to it, I turned around and went back to where Carl was. I told him the scarecrow was stuffed fine, and we didn't need to do anything to it. That night, Carl and I went on the roof. The meteor shower was amazing. I mean, the shooting stars were all over the place. It was around midnight. Everyone in the house was asleep. It was dark, but the moon was also full, so we were able to see everything. While I was laying there on the roof, something caught my eye. The scarecrows were easily visible because they were posted higher than the corn. I looked over at the scarecrow that had scared me earlier. I thought it moved. I shook my head, told myself I was just silly. But then, right before I looked away, I saw the scarecrow jump down from the post and into the corn. I screamed and jumped to my feet. I nearly fell off the roof. Carl asked me what was wrong, and I told him the scarecrow jumped off his post. He looked and saw that the post was empty, but he figured that the scarecrow just fell off, and we would have to go out tomorrow and pick it up. He just wanted to go back to the meteor shower. It was maybe about another 10 minutes when I saw something moving in the corn. I looked and saw the scarecrow emerge from the corn, and he was looking right at me. I told Carl, and this time he noticed it too. He jumped up just like I did, and then we both watched as the scarecrow ran back into the corn. We got down off the roof and got into the house. We woke up our fathers and told them what happened. They thought we were seeing things, but still, they took my grandpa's shotgun and went out into the corn. When they came back, they confirmed that the scarecrow was gone. They didn't see it or anything. They didn't find anything, and we eventually went back to bed. In the morning, my grandma was making breakfast. She went to let the cat outside and saw the scarecrow was on the porch. It was laying there with no stuffing on the porch swing. We don't know what happened. We don't know who was messing with us. But it was a scary experience. I never helped out with the scarecrows ever again. Number 3, Midsummer. This is a true story. I hear a lot of alien abduction stories and demon possessions and that stuff. What can I say? I like a scary story. But sometimes, fact can be far stranger than fiction. The young people in my town have a tradition we call Midsummer Mischief, where, for the last week of August, we would pull pranks on each other. It was all in good fun, of course. People getting pantsed, getting their pants yanked down in the hall at school. Kids getting frightened by friends in masks, surprising them on their way home. And me. One time me and Albert, we called him Albie, filled a kid's locker with old fish heads. We made the paper that year. But this was the last year. We all had graduated. After this, we would all go our separate ways. I had known since the beginning of the year that we had to do something epic. The last year we had saran wrapped the vice principal's car, garage, and house. Me and my friends had been talking all year about how to top our last escapade. It was Dan Carlin that came up with the idea. Dan Carlin was the first of our group to try cigarettes, the first to steal a bottle of booze from his stepfather's liquor cabinet. He was the one that found an abandoned stack of porn on the side of the road and had us all selling the stuff at school. So there we were, lugging a 60-pound scarecrow stuffed with pig guts in Ziploc bags filled with pig's blood, all of which was obtained without question from the local butcher who spoke a little English, up to the edge of Route 8, a major artery leading out of town in the dead of night. Being young as I was, I for some reason thought this was my last chance to do something really stupid. So when the headlights of a car coming down the highway going way over the speed limit, I volunteered to be the one to handle Meaty the Scarecrow. Meaty and I stood on a corner, in a spot where we knew that the car lights would never hit us, and we waited for just the right moment. I could hear the car approaching and knew exactly where they would be. And just as they rounded the corner, I pushed Meaty into the path of a large black sedan. It was as if time slowed down. Meaty did his job and exploded on impact. Blood and guts flew everywhere. The brake lights of the sedan ignited and the tires smoked as the car swerved and screeched to a halt. I had been so awestruck by the gory explosion that I had run out of time to run to my friends in the woods. I dropped to the ground and used the band of the turn as a cover and peeked over the rise to see what kind of havoc we had caused. 4 men in long black coats got out of the car. They were all yelling at each other, presumably about what they had just hit. It only took them a few minutes to realize it was some sort of prank. They seemed to find it amusing, having a laugh, as they all lit up cigarettes. I was relieved that they thought the prank was funny, but I still had no intention of being caught, so I stayed put. The men in the black coats talked for a while, and then turned to get back in their car. As soon as their backs were turned, the last man pulled a submachine gun from under his coat and lit the night up like a strobe light. I pissed myself, I won't lie. I pissed myself, but I didn't move. For the love of life, I didn't move. And the night was dark and quiet again, and the one remaining man in the black coat quickly rifled through the bodies and then hopped in the car and peeled away. I lay there on the bank in shock at what I had just seen. 3 men brutally murdered. I didn't move until my friends came to get me. Then we ran through bramble and swamp, through alleys and people's backyards, all the way to the police station. The police took our reports and let us off the hook for pulling such a dangerous prank when they saw the bodies. We never heard anything about it after that, as if it never happened. I'm not afraid of ghosts or aliens. There are plenty of real things to be afraid of. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I hope you enjoyed these stories. I feel they may have been a little over the top, but I talked with the authors and they agreed, but insisted these stories happened, and you know me, I try to take everything at face value. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, or using the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter using the links in the description. I'm much more active on Twitter though than Facebook. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any other YouTube channel. I hope you'll make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.